So the idea of this shorter presentation is that in order to understand what we've done and why, there's a short introduction to what is the situation of unaccompanied minors in Europe and in Finland at the moment. Europe is a wide context, so I'm only presenting numbers, so we cannot actually say how they are in these different contexts. And then I'm discussing shortly, not in a research way, but how we're learning from these children and young people. Because I think it's very important in order to understand that it's not that we are interviewing them. It's through the living and through discussing and doing with that we actually get this kind of knowledge, which in this project, as well as in Kirsi's project too, which relates to similar group of young people, we want to utilize this experiential knowledge and try to push it in the policy practices, which is of course very challenging, but that's the only way we think that we can change the governance of this issue in Finland and in Europe in general. Not publishing academic articles, but doing something different. So we have a few examples of this. And then we want to, we have a lot of results coming now during the next year, and some of which you will maybe learn more later on in educations that we are, educational happenings that we are organizing next spring, but then you will get an invitation for those. But now we want to present 3 things that we've done. The first is policy brief on housing of unaccompanied minors, that is also in the folders. The storybook made by Mervi Kauko and 13 refugee children in Australia. And then trust concepts, that is the final thing for this presentation. So this is what we want to say now, is that we know that 2015 was a particular kind of year in Europe in many ways in refugee, numbers of refugees. So these are the numbers that ended up in Finland, which is totally different compared to if we had 3,000 unaccompanied minors, Sweden had 34,000, which means that it's 10 times more. So the challenges are a bit different in housing and education there. This year we have by far 128, and as I was talking with our Swedish guest, it's something like 5,000 to 6,000 in Sweden at the moment. 600, okay, yeah. So the numbers there are totally different also, because of the different kind of ways in which the borders are closed in Europe at the moment. So, what is the particular in Finnish context since the 2015 is that we're getting more and more temporary asylum decisions and also negative decisions for unaccompanied minors. And the new thing also is that when the process is not dealt before they're 18, they're most probably being deported after that. So we have a new group of young people now being transferred from the group homes to the reception centers designed for adults. And there are huge problems with these young people at the moment. So, what in this project, what is the idea, what we are doing and try to develop more is the social support in housing, schools and free time, which somehow, through different kind of mechanisms, make these children and young people feel home. Whatever that home means, it doesn't mean that it's in Finland, but it's all over the world actually, because of their transcultural roots and their family ties. So this is just to show you the sudden increase of numbers, sudden increase of the numbers in 2015 and what we have now. This is just the draft that you saw, if some of you were in the first seminar. We just wanted to show you that we are now in this project, we are now in the implementation phase. And this is the first stakeholder workshop that we are organizing, our seminar, from which we tell about the lessons that we've learned from other parts of Europe. But what is important in this is that the trust project bases on 3 assumptions, which have come from the knowledge already from different kind of stakeholders, but also from scientific results beforehand. And they all show the same direction. So there's fractured social relations with these children and young people. There's a lot of loneliness, which is different kind of loneliness, which requires different approaches, not just providing friends, but providing care, need-based care, and compassionate governing, which is not there in many contexts. And then there's structural victimization, which means that they're most often seen as victims and not as resourceful children, as would the Finnish national Finnish nationals as children are more seen as resourceful, but not these. So this is kind of dynamics in the background what we have. The main thing is the minor itself. Then there's social relations, and they're highly dependent on different kind of services because of their situation. And what is their relation to society in large? So these kind of dynamics we are interested in this research project. But what we've done, and in which way, is this. So we've made a lot of work with these children. So we're not just reading reports and looking them from the outside, but we want to learn from them and with them. So that's why we're talking it in a way that, or presenting it in a way that doing with. So we're doing things with the children. And what we've done, in my previous project, I've done 7 months of field work in a family group home here locally, and spent time with the staff, but mostly with the young people themselves. Then we have had different kind of workshop-based events. We worked in a theater. And then we had 4 art workshops in a secondary school, which were Finnish pupils and pupils of preparatory class, valmistavan opetuksen luokka. And then we have had 2 multilingual music workshops, of which you now see one example of. And then we've done 10 weeks of field work in Bremen, which was conducted by Jaakko. And then interviews with professionals in Sweden. So, and we also have a lot of site visits in Finland with the professionals, with people like you who work with these children daily. So what is important in this kind of work? There's 2 words, it's presence and trust. So it requires a lot of time to be there as a researcher, but also to gain the trust with these young people. Because they're not going to talk to you if you ask right away, so what's up, what is going on, what is your situation. But you actually have to make homework, make food, play football, do different kind of things, take them to the park and swimming and things like that, and then they start to talk, like every regular child in the world. So it's not through interviewing, but doing things. So this is what we, for example, did. And in the art workshops, we are not artists, as you can see. We're academics, unfortunately. We've had professional artists to facilitate the processes. And we've been there as hands to help and then collected the data. So, for example, we had a multilingual music workshop, which was for 3 days, and they started with no words, no music, no nothing. And the first thing was that please write 100 words of the places or the feelings that makes you feel good or belonging or home or something nice. They started with that. They could use whatever language, and it was Farsi, Dari, Finnish, English, whatever was their language, or mixed. And then within the 3 days, with professional producers in the end, they ended up to do the videos and music videos for the Jaakko, for their experiences. And what happened is that some of these videos are published by the national broadcast company Yle in Yle Arena, and we will now show you one of the end products. And this is the way in which we want to work. And this is then important process not only for research sake and not only for learning what is multilingual expression and how do these children feel belonging, but it's also empowering in a way, in many ways, for themselves to work together and then see this kind of end result in a national broadcast website. And it's called Älä sure minua, Don't Worry About Me. So yes, you can figure out what kind of field work we've done and how much these young people have told us things within these kind of words. So, this is another format that we want to present to you. It's because we've done a lot of this kind of work, and it's not something that is easily transcribed. As you can see, this is a different kind of transcription of the emotions and feelings that are there. But this is another one. It's just published today. You're the first to get this leaflet, Building Transcultural Trust. That's the blog entries that we've made during this year. There are some that are not in the internet yet because they're coming every month now before December. And the whole issue is there or will be there within a couple of days, also in electronic form. So you can read of these kind of experiments, pilots and fieldwork very easily approachable way. And if you want to share the link, is it there already? Or yeah, it's coming in a few days in our webpage, so you can share the link. And it's in English, so it can be sent even in Sweden and Germany. So, but I'm not going there in more details, but you can find different things, what we've done and how we present it in that leaflet. But what comes to the actually back to the seminar that was already last year was that in the same way that we want you today give us feedback with a bit different kind of questions than last time. We asked about the issues that are challenging or was challenging in the autumn of 2016. And we got a lot of responses from you or the audience that was here in the last seminar. And part of that was now published in May 2017, of course related to other fieldwork and knowledge that we've gained through the research process in the policy brief that we made in May 2017, and that's also part of your folders. So what we argued, or what we wanted to do is that because kotouttamislaki law about integration went to the round and they wanted to have comments on that in May 2017, we knew this and we hit on that. So we made a policy brief about unaccompanied minors and their housing issue in Finland, and we sent it to the ministry, we sent it to different kind of policy networks, and we'll see what happens. We also discussed with the professionals who are making this law in order to get few main things to the law, but of course how it's done and it's a political process we don't know. But what happened was that we got very good response from the field, from the people like you who actually see this kind of challenges in the housing issue, and also in different parts of the housing process. So what we argued was that in that policy brief, and you can read it from your folders, is that family group homes actually should be seen just one option for housing these young people. Then there's actually much more emphasis and resources needed on the foster care idea and the families, whether there's been a discussion in Finland whether the family should be migrant background or Finnish background. Whatever background, they need resources, education and training, and these children need this kind of option. Many of them actually would have better options to integrate if they would live in the family. And this is something that is used at least in some of the European countries, but not in Finland at the moment, in that level that it would really be an option. Then we argued for legally binding obligation for number of staff in supported housing, which is not now under the same law than family group homes. And then mechanisms for social support developed especially to these people who turn 18. So it's the aftercare, and then now in this situation, the young people who are transferred to these big units from the minors units. And then different kind of barriers to independent living should be resolved, and we had some suggestions for that too. For example, the case of city of Espoo, where they have developed, in Finnish it's välivuokraus, but different kind of options not to live independently. Then this is the hello from Australia. So there's a storybook that our researcher Mervi Kaukko made with 13 primary school pupils, and it's called Ali and the Long Journey to Australia. So this is the book cover. It's made by 13 children through storytelling that Mervi was doing there, and it's not a story of one person, but it's a story of these 13 young people telling about Ali and his family going to Australia, and about the war in Somalia. So it's something that we are publishing within a couple of weeks in Australia, and then if you are a representative of an institution and you wish to have this book, so we will put a paper around and ask one of you, there are maybe several of you in the same institution, please provide address where you want this book to be sent. So it's in English. I'm sure many of could utilize this, for example, in the school or in the housing unit. And it's a very touching story. It tells about fleeing and losing the father back in Somalia, and then the boat sinks and or turns around, and all the people are in the sea, and what is happening. So it's not one story, it's something that these young people, or actually children, have witnessed, heard, or then experienced by themselves. So, and you can see, even my child asked that, why did they go to Australia and not Finland? And this is the thing, it's going all over the world, and the experiences are the same, and we can actually learn from each other a lot in terms of not just experiencing, but governing the issues. Okay, the final thing is, and what we want you to maybe then pose questions for this presentation, is that we are developing this kind of idea of trust concepts, not concepts as an academic sense, but concepts that would provide some kind of not maybe the best practices, but good practices that have been in place in somewhere else in Europe, but not in Finland. So this is one way to help you as a practitioner and people who can maybe take these kind of things and put them into action somewhere. So we are developing these kind of concepts now, and during the next spring we will publish maybe 4 to 5 different kind of concepts from our fieldwork, and this is one of those. So now we have named this as Together Support Network for Unaccompanied Minors. This is the draft version, and so that's why we, now when I'm presenting this, we hope that you would keep in mind whether this kind of concept is needed in Finland, what kind of actors and agents are needed in order this to be somehow real, and what kind of activities this kind of constellation would do. And this is based, I will show that later on, it's based on the models that are present in Germany and Sweden already, but not in Finland. So these are in Finnish, but I'm explaining those also in English. So it would be not a network as such, but a net more than we've been calling it as a net, something that works together, brings different officials, professionals, adults that make work with these minors, and the minors themselves somehow together. Because this is what we've heard from the field all the time, that there's a lot of people working with these minors, but they're in their own sectors. So this would mean that there is a wish to support unaccompanied minors, and the minors themselves want to integrate, whatever the integration means, to the society at large and to feel belonging. But then there are different kind of things that are going on in the society. For example, that they are very much targets of governing and not seen as I said, resourceful young people. So these kind of different actors should be somehow brought together in order to handle the questions that are there much more fluently than before. And we know that we have these kind of networks, for example, for disabled people, for other kind of groups that need support in different ways than some other people. So that's why we are presenting this kind of idea. So the target is that the voice of the young people is strengthened, and the other actors are supporting that. So we would see that the young people is in the core of this whole system. What kind of things they would organize? There's peer groups, policy work in the context that is possible, coordination of volunteer works, events and things like that. And even though this sounds impossible, it is possible, because there are already these kind of networks elsewhere. It's said in a bit different way, but what is important in this is that, of course, it doesn't work if we don't have resources. It's not something that we can do voluntarily, but we need coordination and some kind of funding. And but this is something that we need to think of. So, but the background is actually from, at least in Sweden and Germany, there are, in Sweden, for example, the organization that is based on the young people themselves. And what is different in the model that we are proposing now is that because there's, in Sweden there's the officials, and then the young people are in different networks, or they're not coordinated together. And in Germany there's a very strong network of officials that are working around this issue. And they, of course, utilize the experiential knowledge of the young people, but not in a way that the young people would be in the same network. So this would be a combination of that. And why we could, in Finland, why we could do this is that we have 200, maximum 3,000, not 40 or 30,000 of these young people. And also, so the context is smaller. So we could do this if we want, and that is the point we want to make. So these kind of concepts are also results of this project. So it's time for a couple of questions maybe, if we have time, and then we go further to the next speakers. Thank you. We can also